Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special Grinders Live edition. During the NBA All-Star break, we like to bring a little bit of flair out, and today we have a special NHL version of the show. I'll be host for today, Sean, PSU Fans 2, Newsham. You see me in the Discord, I'm sure, in all the different specialist sports. Joining me today is Timothy Buell. Tim, how are you doing with this exciting NHL version of Grinders Live?
I'm pretty excited to do this show with you, Sean. I'm a big-time NBA and NHL grinder, so this has been a fun little week for me with no NBA.
Yeah, it's always an exciting week when you see a bunch of other things get popped up. I know college basketball, we had some bigger prize pool. It would be nice if sometimes they were a little bit bigger the entire NBA All-Star break. It feels like by the time they catch up to the fact that it's All-Star break, it's too late for that.
Yeah, and all these slates during the NBA break have been relatively small, which I was kind of disappointed with in terms of the NHL scheduling.
Yeah, and it was a bit difficult with the whole Olympics fiasco with everything that was set up, and then games were canceled, then they didn't go, so they rescheduled games. So it sort of screwed up the whole entirety of the schedule. So the way we're going to go through it today is we're going to go through each of the 5 games. We'll be talking about different things within those 5 games. We're going to mainly prioritize DraftKings. At the end, we'll talk a little bit about FanDuel pricing as well with different players. So that's how we'll go through it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to post them in the Discord. We'll try to answer as many of those as we can. And then for everyone, just for your guys' knowledge, FanDuel single entry series is back currently. The single entry series is currently going for 4 more weeks. Play as many times as you want each week. Your top 4 combined scores weekly will count for that. And if you finish in the top spot each week, you get an entry to the championships, which will be held on March 23rd for a chance at $10,000. This week's contest is going to be in the $10 NBA dime, and you can find it in the FanDuel lobby now, as long as it hasn't already filled. So make sure you're on the lookout for that as well once NBA returns in the next couple of days. All right, so we're going to jump right into the slate. So the first game we have on the slate tonight is going to be Edmonton versus Tampa Bay. So we have the GOAT, Connor McDavid, bring in with Edmonton and the new Evander Kane. I know Evander Kane is one of my all-time favorites in terms of DFS hockey because he's always a guy that generally is priced a bit lower than he should be due to the shot volume that he produces. So what is your thoughts going into this first game with Edmonton versus Tampa Bay here?
So, I mean, I'm never going to tell anybody not to play McDavid or Draisaitl or any of the top 6 for the Oilers or their power play. But tonight is an extremely tough matchup against the Lightning on the road. I think that McDavid's price is a little too high for single entries or cash game type builds. If you're multi-entering in GPPs, of course you can play him because he can break any slate. Draisaitl's price is a little bit more affordable at $7,800. If I had to choose between the two, it would be Draisaitl. But for me that plays 1 to 3 lineups, I think I'm going to fade both of them tonight.
Yeah, it's always a difficult situation, especially with NHL. Usually you can find value plays that will produce guys like McKinnon, McDavid, those types of players and allow you to play them. However, certain situations will be difficult matchups. Whereas tonight, going into this slate, we would have been expecting to say hey, Nathan MacKinnon, best play on the slate. He's the guy you want. However, he's not playing tonight. So therefore, it turns you down to Connor McDavid. And he is someone that is obviously a great play on every slate. However, the matchup is very difficult. Tampa Bay comes in as a minus 189 favorite, and Edmonton is a plus 169 underdog. So it's a pretty heavy favored game at Tampa Bay tonight in this game. So it's a situation where he may not be the best play. For Tampa Bay on that side of things, someone that I think comes in a little bit cheap for me tonight is Steven Stamkos. He comes in at 6,200 on DraftKings, but this is a guy that we know can produce, know will take shots, and has a chance to put up a good game against an Edmonton team that might struggle to defend. What's your thoughts on Stamkos and the Tampa Bay team in general?
I much prefer Tampa Bay over Edmonton today. My optimal player in expert survey was Nikita Kucherov. He's my first player into my single entry lineup. But you can always go down to Stamkos. I also like Victor Hedman quite a bit. And Brandon Point also.
We'll dig in a little bit to game theory here for people that are coming over freshly from NBA and sports that maybe are not going right now. So when you're constructing your cash game lineups and then you're also your GPP lineups, how do you go about stacking and correlation? And then also, how do you go about whether you pay up for defenders or whether you don't pay up for defenders in either format? And what's your thought process behind it typically?
In cash games and single entry formats, I'm not concerned as much with stacking, and I tend to pay down at defensemen for those smaller risk contests. In larger field GPPs, I'm heavy on stacking, and then I try to have like a more expensive PP1 power play one defenseman, like a Makar or Hedman. But I primarily play just one lineup in single entries and cash games, and so I tend to pay down at defensemen.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to look at things too that people will struggle with. So typically the defenders will have a lot of peripheral stats and sort of floor stats that can produce, but what you'll find a lot of the time in GPP, something that can be very productive, is that 2,500 to 3K defender that just rips off a score point, puts off a assist or a goal, or blocks, let's say, 3 shots and can really reel in a bonus as well. So those are the type of players that you may be looking for in that perspective. So Nikita Kucherov is 8,500 in this game for Tampa Bay. I know we talked a little bit about Stamkos and Hedman. In terms of the higher end guys on the slate, we currently have Kucherov projected as the highest skater on the night per lineup issue in our projections at 16.92. Would he be your favorite overall player, or would you prefer someone else on the slate?
He is my number one player on the slate. He's my first guy I'm going to in my cash game and primary lineup tonight.
Yeah, and that's something that I would say, normally speaking, you're probably looking at like McKinnon or McDavid in a better matchup. So it's a little bit different, I guess, for a winger to be in that position. But in certain situations, especially on smaller slates like we have tonight, that's something that ends up being a bit more of a discussion point to have.
But before McKinnon was ruled out, I had McKinnon as my top play. But then he got ruled out, and that just turned the whole slate upside down.
Exactly. And we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, when we get to the Colorado game a bit later. All right. Next game that we have on the slate tonight, we have Winnipeg at Dallas. The betting line on this game currently is Dallas minus 149, Winnipeg plus 134. So on the Winnipeg side of things, you have a top power play that consists of like Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler. These guys have been together for such a long time. I mean, years at this point, it feels like. So what is your thoughts on Winnipeg going into this game with game at Dallas?
I'm not crazy about this game as a whole. However, I always think that you can play Kyle Connor in any format because the minutes that he gets is so elite. He plays over 20 minutes a night, which is, if for those of you who don't know much about hockey, that's a lot for a forward. His shot volume, his shot floor is tremendous. He's a truly an elite offensive player. and he comes at an affordable price. But again, this matchup, I'm not too crazy about.
Yeah, and it's something people will learn from NHL is it's very correlation dependent, especially in GPPs. So generally speaking, if a guy plays together with someone else on the power play and or even strength, they are more likely to, if there's a goal scored, be connected with that goal, which generally speaking, there are only going to be 3 to 4 goals per night. Obviously, there could be more or less, but from a given team, you generally will expect about 3 goals a night, give or take. So if there are only 3 goals from a team, it's very important to make sure that your pieces are getting attached on those goals or it is difficult to produce. Another thing that is very important within the hockey infrastructure is the ownership of players. You see ownership typically more spread out in hockey compared to other things. And that is because it's more of an event-based sport, similar to like baseball, comparatively to NFL and NBA, where you see people be severely heavily owned. So, Tim, as someone that plays hockey frequently, why don't you tell everyone what it looks like in terms of like chalky players? So I know chalk in NHL is a significantly lower number than it is in the other sports.
Compared to NBA, there's nothing, it's not even close to what it is at NBA. You don't get the guy, you don't get the cheap guy who's like 80% owned in cash games or 90%, except for the night that DraftKings had Evander Kane priced at 2,500, his first game back. I mean, that was an exception. Usually it's not like that. You don't have the tremendous ownership gravitating towards one player. Like usually you'd see a guy like McKinnon, Matthews, McDavid in a good matchup be, say, 50% owned. And then even if you got like that $2,500 defenseman that you think is in an elite play, they're not going to be 80% owned like you'd get a min-priced basketball player.
Yeah, and like looking through our projected ownership for tonight, which is a great example of like what we're talking about here. So it is a 5-game slate, which is smaller than what you would normally expect for like a bigger sized GPP slate contest day. You'd normally expect like 8 to 10 games on Tuesdays, Thursdays, give or take, sometimes even more. So we're talking about a relatively short slate with 5 games. And if you look at the overall ownership, we're expecting like no one to really be above 25 to 30% owned. So NBA, like Tim just mentioned, if you have a guy that's mispriced in NBA, he might be 80, 85% owned, whereas that just does not happen in the NHL. All right, on the other side of this game, we have Dallas coming in. They are a slight favorite, but there's not really expected to be much ownership in general in this game. What's your thoughts on Dallas as a whole? And then do you see the possibility that this game could have a bit more goals because nobody looks like they'll be so heavily owned in this game to rule it out?
The thing with me with Dallas is it's their first line with Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski. Other than that, unless you want to go down to their third line with Ben and Radulov, I have no interest in their forwards really. Jason Robertson is an elite young player, but his price keeps going up too. So today, I just think there are better spots on the board that we'll get to. He's kind of at a funny matchup and a funny price that's not leading me to roster him in my single entry build. If you want to play him in GPPs, I think that's completely fine.
Yeah, and I think looking at GPPs, so as Tim has mentioned, they might not be the best plays, especially on the surface in this game with Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski, but they come in at an average of like 7K between the 3 of them on DraftKings, and they will probably have an ownership combined of like below 20%. So if you want to get different on a short slate without, let's say, playing second, third line type players on some of these other teams, this could be a spot that might be of interest to you because people are going to play the Kucherovs of the world. They're going to play the Hedmans of the world, the Stamkoses. And if they're playing those guys, it makes it incredibly difficult to go into these guys as well. All right. Next game we're going to look about the undisputed best team in the league, right, Tim? The Buffalo Sabres. There's no team that's better or has a brighter future than them against Montreal Canadiens. And we have a situation where Buffalo is actually pretty much a coin flip here with Montreal, which shows how far Montreal has tumbled. It's -105, -105. So it's basically smack dab down the middle between Buffalo and Montreal in this game. So what I heard that you have a bet that you like in this game. So what do you like on the betting side of things in this game, Tim?
Yeah, I wrote this game up on my article on scoresandodds.com. I took the over 6 for this game. And on top of that, I think there's a lot to like from a DFS perspective in this matchup.
Definitely. If you guys are looking to get some sports betting out, just remember that New York sports betting just launched if you're in New York. PointsBet is joining the list of New York sports bets. If you use the promo code RG2K, you'll get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. You can find a full list of sportsbook offers available in the link in the description, or simply go to the Rotogrinders homepage, navigate to the sports betting tab, and click New York, and you can find a list of all sports books available and all relevant promotional offers and more. So if you guys are in New York and you haven't got in on the sports betting wave thus far, make sure you check out that in the description and see if there's something that might be of interest to you. Yeah, so I was talking to Moneyball 16 beforehand, who helps run the NHL projection side of things here at Rotogrinders. And we were talking about the best team in hockey, the Buffalo Sabres, and how their top line has been absolutely incredible lately. They've really been scoring at a really strong clip, and it's a really, really good matchup for them tonight. You guys will have to be aware of Rasmus Dahlin is questionable. Whether or not he plays will probably not be known until a bit later. But Alex Took, Tage Thompson, and Jeff Skinner all have pretty strong projections tonight. And with the matchup they have, I think they are one of the best spots on the night. What do you think?
Yeah, the Canadians give up the most goals in the NHL. And, Alex Tuch has been a tremendous addition for the Sabres that came along with the Eichel trade. I think this game is going to be very sloppy on the defensive end. And I think there's going to be a lot of soft goals. The Skinner Thompson Tuch line gets full correlation on the power play. And I think that, it's really the Sabres and the Avalanche for me in terms of high end rostership tonight.
Yeah, and especially with the fact that you're expecting 6+ goals in this game. Generally speaking, if you're expecting 6+ goals, that is the game that you're looking to target. Right. Not only just from that side, probably, but also the Montreal side as well, which we'll get to in a minute. So in the event that Rasmus Dahlin is out, who do you think will be the biggest beneficiary? Because that's something that's not known currently, and people will probably want to take advantage of that if that occurs.
It's probably Joki. We'll probably jump to the first power play unit. Now, he's not anything special. So I don't know if I'd necessarily this is one thing that people need to know. It isn't like basketball. It's not like you instantly plug and play. It's not like you instantly plug and play the replacement guy. It's a lot different kind of animal. I wouldn't necessarily just jump on him if Dahlin is out. That's just I think there are better lower end, lower price defensemen like Ryan McDonough for the Lightning. That would be a better play for under $3K.
Yeah, and with Joe Kaharu coming in at 4,100, significant discount there. And a lot of the time, you're that mid range, sort of that 4 to 5K range, can be like a dead man zone.
Well. I'd much rather play Casey Fitzgerald for cheaper too for the Sabres. Of course you can roster Joe Hari, but I'm not going to do it personally.
Yeah, and something for people to understand too, in regards to how hockey works. So the projections in other sports can be significant. In the NBA, some player might be out, it might shift someone like 20 points upwards or downwards. Right. NHL, all of these guys' projections are going to be within like a half a point to a point on the lower end guys. So like you just mentioned a couple people in this game, like Fitzgerald right now, his projection is 5.4 and Joe Kaharu is 6.5. So like let's all of a sudden say Dahlin's out. It might not mean that Dahlin's 10-point projection gets distributed significantly to them. Like let's say Joe Kaharu goes to 8, Fitzgerald goes to 7. Whoever the new person in the lineup goes to like 5. So the margins in which players get their projections adjusted might be a lot less drastic than what you see in other sports. A correlation question for you here is you talked about Tuck, Thompson, and Skinner being correlated both on even strength and the power play. I know there's been discussion in the hockey industry about whether people care about power play correlation, even strength correlation, or both. When you're generally building your lineups and your stacks, how do you go about that? Do you want them to have correlation both at even strength and on the power play, or do you not really care?
Yeah, definitely I do. So like last night, for instance, I stat Robert Thomas, Buchnevich, and Teravainen. Oh, no, not Teravainen, Tarasenko.
Mm-hmm.
And, because they have full correlation on even strength, full correlation on the power play. Granted, they busted, but that's the type of lineup that I want. Because, it's a lot like baseball, like you said. I mean, you want the full goal assist, just like you want the full RBI run. It's the same kind of idea.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly. All right. So on the other side of the ice in this game, we have Montreal Canadiens. Someone that I think we'll be talking about when we go over to FanDuel as well in this game is Cole Caulfield. So he has been really, really strong since Martin St. Louis has taken over. Do you think, Tim, that is attributed to the fact that St. Louis knows how to use someone of his size?
Yeah, I mean, I love Cole Caulfield. I mean, he struggled his first couple weeks and didn't put any points up on the board, and now he's on fire. And his price is, I think it's $3,700 on DraftKings, and he's my favorite value play on the board. So even for FanDuel and DraftKings, he's a great play.
Yeah, and so this game, like we talked about the over 6, and you like the over 6 in this game, with the fact that it's probably a bit of a coin flip, in fact, both sides can win. If you're looking down list here at the Montreal Canadiens roster, there are a total of 0 players above 5K. So it means you can get a tremendous savings all throughout the entirety of the Canadiens roster. So do you like other players on the team, or do you really only like Caulfield?
No, I love Josh Anderson. I love Brandon Gallagher. You could throw in Mike Hoffman, of course. He's cheap enough. And Nick Suzuki, he's a little bit more expensive, but if you want to full stack it, then by all means, he's a good play.
Yeah. And do you like to full stack games, or do you try to avoid the full stacking of games?
Nah, I mean, well, because I like both of these matchups, then this would be a game stack for me, but I don't do it like you would game stack, like I don't do it like a run back like you would in football. I mean, those hockey, it's kind of a separate event. But since I like both of these offenses because of their prices and because of their matchups, I'm certainly going to have plenty of Sabres and plenty of Canadians.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good way to go about it. And that's the nice thing with hockey is you can sort of do it all of which ways. You can play game stacks, you can play team stacks, you can play different line stacks within the game. Really, there are no ends to how you can go about it, especially with a game you really like.
It's very similar to baseball. I mean, people are like, do you game stack? Well, maybe I do if the game's in Coors Field and it's 90 degrees and it's both number 4 pitchers are going, then yeah, there's going to be a game stack involved, but it's not because they necessarily correlate with each other.
Definitely. All right, next game on the slate, we have the biggest favorite of the night, the Colorado Avalanche against the Detroit Red Wings. We have Colorado at -246, Detroit at +217. So the big news with this one, obviously, is that Nathan MacKinnon is out of this game for the Avalanche. However, I personally still like I think Mikko Rantanen is a bit cheap on DraftKings. I think that he is in line for a decent game. He's someone that we actually looked. So I talked to Moneyball 16 at this one as well. He looked at like a 12-game stretch that McKinnon missed previously, and Rantanen's shots on goal, because we were talking about if Rantanen had a tremendous increase in shots with McKinnon out, and his shots went from like 3.6 to 3.67. So there wasn't like a tremendous increase, but I think that he is someone that is undervalued a bit compared to his price. And he is one of the most expensive players on FanDuel. So what is your thoughts on Nazem Kadri? Because I know that is someone you liked in this game even before the news.
Yeah, before the news, I bet Kadri's over 3.5 shot prop over on DraftKings Sportsbook, and they gave that out at plus 135. So I'm hoping to cash that ticket tonight. But the overall prices for the Avalanche in this matchup are a little bit too low, and I think that makes them a fantastic play in all formats. And I believe that it's going to be JT Compher that takes over on the power play for McKinnon, and he's 3,200 on DraftKings, and he makes for a fantastic value play.
Definitely, and that's something. So when we look at previous games with like the Winnipeg Dallas game, so for example, Colorado is the biggest favorite on the entire slate by a pretty significant margin. Their total and implied goals is about a half a goal more than everyone else on this slate, and like that Winnipeg Dallas game, their total is about a full goal or more higher than what Winnipeg's expected goals are. Yet the prices are very similar to those two teams. Like if you look at that top line for Dallas in comparison to the top line for Colorado here, it's a pretty big difference. And then, like you just mentioned, having the ability to plug in JT Compher on a top power play stack at 3,200 as the biggest favorite on the night is really viable and really valuable as a punt option. It gives you tons of flexibility and ability to maneuver this team. So, for example, you can play Ronton, Kadri, Landeskog, Makar, and Compher, and you can stack them, let's say 3, 4, 5-man stacks. You can run them all different ways. And being able to include Compher in all of them is incredibly valuable to free up salary.
The other big thing about this game is on the other side of it is whether, I don't know if you've heard if Dylan Larkin's going to be playing or not. He's questionable or day-to-day because he got hurt in practice yesterday. That's going to have huge implications on the Red Wings. Larkin's by far their best two-way player, and they won't have anybody to. I think it'll be Pierre Suter. I think that would jump up, and he's nothing compared to the talent of Larkin.
Yeah, and as of right now, Larkin is still a game time decision. We have not heard any more whether or not he's going to play. He was a participant in morning skate, which would indicate he likely plays. However, especially in the COVID times, you never know with that. But yeah, so that is definitely something to look out for. And that's something I feel like people miss in terms of hockey is if you have the top center or top defenseman out for a game, someone that really logs minutes and is responsible for shutting down the opposition's top line, when they are out, there's generally no replacement that can properly fill their shoes. And it makes a bit of a different game altogether for them. So definitely something to look for. So on the Detroit side of things, especially if Larkin makes them even less appealing to me. But I think for me, they are the least appealing team on the slate. I don't see much that I like on this team. I don't see pricing wise that I like. Do you see anything differently?
No, I think this team is a full stay away, regardless of the Larkin news.
For sure. Yeah, like looking at pricing, like you see like Sider, you see Larkin, Bertuzzi, like their average is 6K, and they are the biggest underdog on the slate by a significant margin. It makes it very difficult to me to warrant that.
Yeah, I think, and they're just a little bit. I mean, even like a guy like Bertuzzi, who I normally would love, they're just a little bit too expensive for this matchup.
Exactly. All right, on to the last game of the night, the late night hammer, and the only game at night. We have the Los Angeles Kings versus the Arizona Coyotes. LA comes in at minus 201 compared to that of Arizona at plus 179. We have a bunch of options within the Kings organization. We have Arvidsson, we have Kopitar, Doughty, Kempe, guys that have been around for quite a while. One thing that stuck out to Moneyball 16 is that the second line for the Los Angeles Kings, that being Arvidsson, Trevor Moore, and Philip Deneau, have really been good as of recently. Is that something that you could see sort of continuing in this game, or is that just sort of a fluke in a short-term situation?
Yeah, Victor Arvidsson, I wrote him up in Expert Survey as my favorite contrarian play. Really, I mean, I don't know how contrarian he'll actually be, but he is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, GPP plays of the day. And the other thing that I'll say about this is that I believe this game is 2.5 hours later than any other game on the slate. And I feel like, this could be a forgotten game in terms of ownership in large field GPPs. So this could be a good game theory angle to kind of wait and, have exposure to the Kings.
Yeah, when I used to grind hockey all the time and MME and chase live final seats and everything, I had a really bad habit of jamming in the late games. So it was basically like San Jose over and over again with like Burns and Kane and those guys. And then it was also like the LA Kings when it was like Tyler Toffoli, Tanner Pearson. Like they looked like all their Corsi metrics and all the advanced metrics looked unbelievable with them. And then every game would happen and they would score one goal because they couldn't score to save their lives. Right. So anyways, I used to be well known for jamming those because for me, it's a lot more fun to come from behind instead of sit there and have to hold on for hours. But especially when you only have one game, it gives you the ability, like you said, I think that game goes under-owned. The only person I'm seeing that we expect to be over 10% owned is Arvidsson, and it's even that is very minimal percentage at like 13%. And there's not much difference on the Arizona side of things. So you could definitely get different in this game as well. And it lets you play off of how your lineup did already based on how you go into this game.
Personally, I'm not a Drew Doughty guy, but I think, LA1 is a really good play because they have full correlation on the power play. Obviously, if you want to add Doughty in there, that's fine. For me personally, I'm not going to do that. I'm a huge Adrian Kemke guy. He has tremendous talent. I think he's 5,100 on DK. I think he makes for a good pivot off of Arvidsson if you think that he's going to become too high owned.
Definitely. All right, on the other side, so a bit different than the Detroit game, I do actually see some people that you can play just as pure punts. Phil Kessel at 3,500 is at least an option that you can throw in there. And there are a lot of guys that are like between the 2,500 to like 4K range here that you could at least throw in there as a lower owned type thing. So like you look at like you could play a Nick Schmaltz, Lawson Krause, Phil Kessel stack, and it's like 9K combined. So especially if you're trying to get in some high plays, I could see some Arizona options being there for you as a way to free up salary. Do you see that, or are you not really interested in them at all?
I love a little two-man of Nick Schmaltz and Clayton Keller. I'm a huge fan of Clayton Keller. He won me a lot of money earlier in the season. His price has come up a little bit, but he's still such a high volume shooter. And I love players that have a solid shot floor, and he's that type of player that fits that bill. I'm probably not going to go with Kessel, but just because I like, the Canadians and that kind of price range so much more, but it does make for a really good pivot in a large field GPP.
Definitely. All right. So I know we did not talk much about goalies. That's probably out of I hate goalies and view them as just a giant variance fest. So is there any thoughts that you have on goalie tonight? Because I will pass on giving any advice on the category because I just say stack whoever goes with your line to the best.
So I personally am going to go with Jake Ottinger for the Stars. That's going to be my goalie on my primary team this evening. Now, if you just really want to say and just be really safe and you just want the win, I would say then you're going to be going with the Avalanche goalie. I believe it's Francois tonight. And then
it is him, yes.
Yeah, and then Vasilevsky for the Lightning. I think it's going to see a lot of volume tonight.
For sure.
I think he's worth a GPP flyer, but it's really those three that I would recommend.
For sure. All right, everyone, we're going to be wrapping up here in a few minutes. If you have any questions, throw them in the live stream chat Discord, and we'll get to them here before we get off. Couple thoughts on FanDuel. Something that I think is of interest on FanDuel. Both of the goalies in the Buffalo-Montreal game are really cheap. You have Craig Anderson and Montembeault. They're both around 7K. Someone in that game probably ends up having a decent game, whoever pulls out the win, especially that of like Montreal generally takes a lot of shots and does not score that much. So there's a situation where I think Montembeault or Craig Anderson on the other side could be viable options from a price perspective. And then some different skaters and pricing metrics that we can look at here. So we see like Mikko Rantanen is the fourth highest skater. Oh no, I'm sorry, sixth highest skater. It's a bunch of them are clumped up there. But you saw on DraftKings like McDavid, Kucherov, these guys are like 9K, and we saw Rantanen come in at 6,500, I believe. It might have even been lower, 6,200, I believe, or 7,200, compared to that of FanDuel, where he comes in right lumped together with those guys at 9K. And I think that he's someone that will really showcase well. And then some of the guys that you just previously talked about, and I'll let you touch on them again, is Brandon Gallagher and Cole Caulfield. So both of them come in as the two best point per dollar players on FanDuel entirely tonight. And they both are on the same power play unit, with Caulfield being 4,700 and Gallagher being 4K. So I know we talked about them earlier, but why don't you touch on them a little bit more?
So Gallagher's had a really, really bad year as a whole. And so has his entire team. But ever since their coaching change, they've had a little bit of life to them. And I think that we can kind of ride this wave a little bit, ride this momentum, and especially in a matchup against the Sabres. For me, it's Gallagher and Caulfield are my first two value pieces for single entry and large field.
For sure. And then, so another thing to note is if I actually sort for price per dollar on FanDuel in the defender column, Cale Makar is actually the top point per dollar person, even at 7K on FanDuel. Generally speaking, FanDuel, you're usually able to fit people in a little bit easier, and it allows the flexibility to play more guys like this. So would you be more open to playing a Makar on FanDuel compared to DraftKings?
I would play him in both, really. I think that since McKinnon is out, it brings down the price of that Avalanche, PP1 stack so much that you can go Landeskog, Rantanen, Makar, or and even throw in Comfer or throw in Kadri. I mean, it has kind of changed the whole, complexity of the slate.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing is it's moving McKinnon out is really opens up different options, because I think, like you said earlier, if McKinnon was playing, he's probably 50 or 60%, give or take. Whereas now it's a whole different ballgame where there's not that much concentration due to him not being here and Connor McDavid not having the best matchup overall. So it makes it a lot more interesting as well. All right, that is going to wrap it up for us tonight. Tim, do you have anything else to add before we call it a day here?
No, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, of course, anytime. All right, everyone, that's going to call it for us today. Good luck to everyone out there on the NHL streets tonight. For Tim, I am Sean. Good luck. We'll see you guys later.